Welcome back, everybody. We're going to be working on the Unit 6 subqueries assignment. We have the directive here to use the My Guitar Shop database on this one, and then we have a list of 5 tasks to complete. Let me make sure that all my tools are running, and I'm going to go into my task manager here because, frankly, I do forget whether or not I've used MySQL recently, and I do toggle it on and off, and I know I talk about this every time. Like right now, it is stopped, so I do want to make sure that it's started here in my services. So now it is running in the background. And let's go ahead and bring up MySQL Workbench. Back to our local instance here. And I do have a bunch of tabs open from last time, so let's just kind of get rid of all those. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure my Unit 5 code is saved. Oh, it's a little sluggish on that action. And we'll just start a new SQL file here. And we are using the My Guitar Shop database. So let's just go ahead and issue that use statement right off the bat. And let's zoom in a little bit too. It's kind of hard to see. And let's execute that query. We are now attached and ready to do the first exercise. I've copied the directive from the instructions here, and I'm just going to paste it in the form of a comment, just so I don't have to bounce back and forth. And it says create a query displaying the category name of only those items that can be found in the products table. And there's a hint, right? And it says hint, there are categories not being used. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. And what I would say here, right, is so that this really makes sense to your brain as you're doing it, is let's look at our data, and I think that's always a good practice. Especially like when you're operating the way that we are, where it's like you might work on it a couple days a week and then you step away for a week. Like if you were working on a database system that you worked on every single day, you would know that inside and out what fields are where, right? But we kind of forget. So the category name only of those items that can be found in the products table. So it seems like the products table is the table we need to look at here. So let's take a look. All right, so we have a bunch of different types of guitars, it seems like. And I noticed that all the things that are guitars, right? And I know these are guitars because I happen to play them. So it's like, yeah, those are all guitars. Yes, indeed. These two seem to be, I think, bass guitars. And these are drum sets. And so I'm seeing 3 different category IDs. So we're pulling from 3 different categories. Now that begs the question, if the hint is there are categories not being used, maybe we need to look at the categories table also. And then I see there's basses, drums, guitars, and keyboards. And I did see 3 of those, categories 1, 2, and 3 certainly were there, but not keyboards. There are no keyboards in the mix. All right, so that's helpful to know, right? So we know what our products table looks like, and we know what the categories table also looks like. All right, so now given that information, and also keeping in mind that basically we're trying to write a subquery here, right? We have to start thinking about, okay, how am I going to write a subquery that's going to pull back the information that we need? And what we're looking for is just the category name of only the items that can be found in the products table. So really, what should it come back with? Guitars, basses, and drums. That's what it should come back with. So in our brain, we kind of know what we're looking for. The inner query that we want, and your brain might operate this way. Sometimes my brain kind of works in the reverse, strangely. And sometimes I think about the inner query first, and what is it from the inner query that I would want to, well, like pool of information do I really want to figure out, right? Um, well, maybe it's that whatever's in the products table here. I mean, I kind of figured out the question by looking at the information. And basically what I figured out is that I'm looking for all the category IDs that exist here. And I can just do it visually, right? Because the data set's really small. Well, there's some ones, there's some twos, and there's some threes. Okay, done. Right, we have our thing. Um, but we also want to have the category name, but only of the ones that appear here. So what would the inner query look like, right? So the inner query might be, because for me, the first step of filtering this, think about this, is I'm looking here at the products table and I'm just pulling out the category IDs of what's there. And I can just kind of did it manually. So that's my inner query, basically. And so I'm going to write the inner query first. This is kind of weird, but this is how my brain operates because I also know the inner query will operate first. And I got to spell category correct. Boy, don't look at the big monitors on the wall when you type because there's such a delay. So we're looking for the category ID from the products table. Do I need to add anything else to this? And the reality is no. I'm just looking for all category IDs that exist in that table. Yeah, I realize there's going to be duplicates. Got it. Right. All right. So that's my inner query. That's all there is to it. Now I'm going to wrap parentheses around this. So don't forget to do it later. I want you to notice that because this query is contained in parentheses, and this is pretty important, I'm not terminating it with a semicolon. If I put a semicolon in here, it would stop the whole statement, so the outer query wouldn't work. So just be mindful of that. So the parentheses are a container. So that you don't forget to close the inner query, what I suggest is put in your semicolon now. But it goes outside the parentheses, not inside. Okay. Now I'm going to write the outer query. So what is it ultimately that we're trying to select? And it says they want a query displaying the category name. So I am going to select the category name from which table? Well, the category table, because that's where the names of the categories are. Spell it right. And now I'll do my filtering. I'll put in my where clause and I'll say where the category ID is in the result of the subquery. Now, as I have it typed right here, this will work just fine, right? And I did, I think, allude to the fact that some database programmers would kind of lay it out like this, right? It was in that example from that one site. So some people will write it like that. Some people will also write it like this. And I think this is probably my preference, right? Is to kind of do it like this. And okay, so this kind of like is a programming thing. I might even split the parentheses like that because that way my brain sees it better. So you can lay it really lay it out any way you wish. But if I had to pick a format for creating it, I guess I like this approach the best. The one reason is why the opening and closing parentheses and the closing semicolon are all on separate lines. So for me, it's easier to see. Another approach, by the way, would be to do this, right? That's kind of pretty clear to see also. And I just will reiterate, the computer kind of really doesn't care how you do it. Now, why are those turning yellow? Because the debugger on the fly engine inside of this coding product, when I highlight the one parentheses, it shows me which one matches it. Here's a question we didn't answer during the lecture. Is it possible to run a subquery inside the subquery. Ooh, yeah, you totally can. It does become a little bit of a logical leap, though, right? Like you have to like conceptualize it in advance. All right, let's leave it in this format. This format's fine. And then my cursor's within all the code here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the run. And it gave me an error message. What's my error message? It says, table my guitar shop categories doesn't exist. Yeah, oh, right. And right, I spelled it categories. Right. So these are the kind of like weird questions I get from students. It's like, I checked my code. I swear it was right. And I followed your code exactly. And it's like, yeah, I followed my code exactly. I just made a mistake. So there you go. That's why it didn't work. All right. So let's fix that. And the thing to do always is to read, the error message down here. And it says, table, my guitar shop categories doesn't exist. And I go there and look and go, oh yeah, sure enough, there was an extra R in there. Let's run it again. And now I have a different error. Almost like I did it on purpose, right? What's the error this time? Same one. I put an R in there, right? But okay, so if you guys are watching me and coding along, that's totally fine. It's a fine way to get your work done. Um, But if you weren't, right, and you were trying to do this work on your own, and then you get an error message, that's, what I always tell coders is when you're learning how to code, when you start out, especially, or even when you get like deeper into more complicated things, most of the time your code is not working. That's kind of a heavy concept, right? It's like, so I'm going to work at this, and most of the time my code's not going to work. Yeah, it's what you do with it though, and how you react to it. So the important thing is don't freak out. Is what I tell people. There's usually a fix, or your logic is wrong. Now let's run it, and now you see that I do have a result, and it's pulling back the information that we already know, right? That we would just get the three of the four category types with keyboards being excluded. Right. I'm assuming that worked for everybody here. Guys are all good. Just going to readjust my windows here just a little bit. All right, let's move on to the next exercise here. I'm going to, once again, I have all the instructions captured here as comments. I'm just going to paste it in. So we'll move on to number 2. Number 2 says, create a query displaying the product name and list price for the products. Use a subquery where the list price is greater than the average product list price. Display in descending order. And then I have in there, by the way, these superfluous numbers. And did I get that from the assignment description? No, I didn't. Right? So where did that come from? I must have calculated it. Yeah, so this is kind of weird, right? Um, so use a subquery, the list price is greater than the average product list price displayed in descending order. So I did calculations to figure out what those were, and I pasted them in here. Now, the reason I do this is to basically verify that my information is correct. So is it possible for me to look here, take all those prices, and calculate an average price? Sure, right? Um, I would take all the numbers, add them together, divide by the number of numbers. There's not that many, so I can actually like tangibly figure it out. And apparently last time I taught this live in class, I must have went mechanically through the process of exactly doing that. Right. I'm not saying that that's a necessary step here, but it just shows you that in some cases it's okay to put in the forethought to maybe do a calculation and verify that you're getting the right results. Right. So these are kind of values that we're targeting, and I'll say, you know, right, so let's write the code on this. All right. Create a query displaying the product name and list price for the product. All right. This case, I'm going to write the outer query first. I'm going to say select product. You guys have to catch me on my spelling errors here. My fingers are not warmed up yet. So those are the two columns they want us to grab. And they're saying from the products table. So that part's pretty simple. And because of the way that they're phrasing this, they're kind of giving us the format of the thing. You know, that's why I'm just kind of following it. Where the list price, this comes right from the description, right? Is greater than the average product list price. So it has to do the calculation first. So you can see why that's a subquery. Right. That makes total sense to make that a subquery. And then watch what I do here. Open parenthesis, close parenthesis, semicolon at the end. Now I'm going to type in my subquery and I'm going to indent it. Notice the format that I'm using. So we'll just do another select. And in this case, we're going to run the average function since it's available to us. What are we averaging? We're averaging the list price. From where? And I'll do this on a separate one. From the products table. So from the same table. It does also say display in descending order. So I'm going to put an order by after the closing parentheses. So down here, I'm going to say order by the list price descending. So the biggest values at the top. This is my query. I'm going to go ahead and run this. I can see the output here, and I'll just arrange my screen so you can see it all at the same time. And then if you think about the fact that I went through and I calculated this. All right, so here's the question. How could I calculate that? Well, I'll tell you what. Here's an approach. I could just take that subquery, and you may not even think about this, and I can just run it standalone. Like, how did I come up with that number? Yeah, I could have like looked at the output, typed it into a calculator, dropped it into Excel, right? But I could have also just run this query and it just told me. So where did that number come from? Well, I can't, you could calculate it with the query. And, you know, if you wish, you could say to calculate so see the thinking there, right? So, I mean, your inclination is to use an external tool to make that calculation, but hey, you know what? SQL can do it too. So that's kind of an approach. So therefore, if I was to look at the products table and look here, I can see visually, because the list is really small, that those two instruments, both of the Gibson guitars, are over that average list price, and everything else is below. So I can tell that my output for this query, right, is correct then. So that's an approach to solving this. Of course, you can use a calculator too, but hey, you know, you got this computer and this coding language, you can figure it out here as well. And it's okay to write little queries like this to figure stuff out, to drive your bigger queries. And it's like, okay, what is that price? Oh, okay. But you see how that inner query can stand alone and you can get a value from it. So really all the inner query here is doing is giving us that number that we're comparing to. Kind of clever. All right. All right. Let's move on to number 3. All right. Write a query that displays only those category names that are not in the products table. Okay, and notice we're getting a little bit of a hint here. It says the subquery should use the terminology where not exists. All right, so this is kind of interesting. So we're only going to display the category names that are not in the products table. The thing is, we already know the answer to this, right? Yeah, we do. And if we wanted, we could add other categories to the table to make it more interesting. I'm not going to do that, but that's kind of stuff you could do to experiment. So what are we trying to display? So how would we write our outer query? What are we trying to display? Category name is what we're looking to display. So I'm writing the outer query first this time. So category, yep, almost misspelled it again. Name is what we're trying to output from the categories table. If you wish, you could alias this. We haven't been doing that a lot, but you could alias this stuff and you could, um, you could do stuff like this. Or, really, if you alias it, you can alias it to whatever you want. I just don't want you to forget that we can do that, basically. All right. Now here comes our where clause. So they told us to say where not exists. So we're looking for true or false. We're looking for false is what this is telling us, not true. So what we're looking for then is all the products where, think about this, the category ID is present, right? But the inverse of that. I don't know if that makes sense in the way I just said it, but here's the code that matches it. So I'm actually going to do a select all, right? It's a wildcard from the products table. Oops, from products, where the category ID think about this. I'm doing kind of the same query I did originally, right? So I'm looking in the products table. I know not all the products exist there. So now I'm going to find all the products that do exist in the products table. And I want the opposite of that. That's the not exists part. You guys see where I'm going with that? No? Right. So I'm going to use that alias. Here's where the alias is helping me out because I don't have to type category twice, basically, and misspell it twice. Like so. Oh, thank you. That one I didn't do on purpose. All right. Let's go ahead and run this. And it does give us that keywords, but it allows us, and this is kind of an interesting approach. Like if I can get a hit on what does exist, right? Like what does ring true that's in the products table, right? By using the inverse, I can grab what doesn't. And I think that's really pretty cool. So this one we're going to do in a little bit different fashion. And I just gave everybody heads up here in the classroom and the Zoom session that rather than code through and just give you the answer right away on this one, I'm going to put the assignment, so to speak, or the coding challenge on the screen. And then I'm going to ask you guys to take a little bit of time working on your own and see what you come up with. And then I'll come back and show you my solution. So I am going to pause the video here right after I read this description. So number 4 is write a query that displays the product name and discount percentage from the products table. All right, I think that part's pretty easy, right? So that's a simple select from, right? And they tell you which columns and table to use. So your first 2 lines of your query are already set. Then use a subquery to make sure only to select those products where the discount percentage is not in the products table having a count greater than one. I'm going to let you just ruminate on that and think about that for a minute. But here's how I would proceed to get started is write the stuff that you know you're going to do, which is basically like the first sentence of this. That's pretty easy to do. So just write that in and you know it's going to be followed by a where clause, right? And then it's just a matter of tweaking it a little bit. Now, the other thing that I'll tell you before you run on this is think about expanding your subquery to include other components that we've learned, let's say, in the previous week, like summary queries that might help you out in the process of this. That's my hint to you. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to give you like somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 minutes to work on this. All right, so here we go. All right, so I gave the challenge. I gave everybody, I don't know how many minutes to kind of think about this and work their way through it. And what I will do here is kind of paste the solution in chunks and explain the why. I think the first part's pretty clear, right? Because it's kind of in the first sentence, because this is what they want to display on the screen ultimately. So this part's very clear, right? The outer query is very evident. Then let's get into our where clause. And we're told right off the bat here where the discount percentage is not in. Okay, so they're giving us the wording, right straight up, right? So once again, pretty easy to just paste that in. So if you're feeling like, I don't know where to go with this, and you're not getting at least this part of it, well, then you're missing what's being told to you above. The challenging part is to get the other piece, right? The inner query is the challenge here. And all right, let's read that second sentence. Use a subquery to make sure only to select those products where the discount percentage is not in the products table having a count greater than one. So they're giving you another clue here that you're going to use the having statement inside of here. So you're using a summary query to kind of do it. So if you're thinking like this, and I'm just going to paste this in one piece at a time here, well, two pieces, depending on how you count, right? So once again, we're still selecting the discount percent from the products table, right? Because we need to analyze it. And ultimately, we want to have the having a count, right? So there's that function coming in of the discount percent that is greater than one. Okay, so my question here is, so we're just coming off the unit of subqueries, excuse me, summary queries, right? Where we started learning about this statement. And often when we're using it, right, we also do this group by command too. And the group by is to kind of organize it. So I would say that this part of it is maybe superfluous, but I think it's helpful to have that in too. But this is the solution right here, right? The other thing that you might want to throw in is once you do pull the information back, is to think about maybe sorting it a little bit so it's easier to look at. And what I did was I ordered it by product name. I thought that was a good approach. So once again, I could argue that you could maybe omit this and this, still get good results. But I think at the very least, this is really the key to getting that subquery to run correctly. All right, let's run it and see if it gives us what we think. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Let's hit the little run button here. All right, so notice the discount percent. But what's the criteria where we had some sort of a discount percent greater than one? So why is the Washburn showing up? I think part of that is, let's look at, the table here. right? Um, we're looking, mind you, for look at the query again. The discount percent is not in the thing having the count of a discount percent greater than one. So is this the right output? You guys are very dead silent. You're not even sure, right? All right. Let's go back to the products table and take a look here. So look at maybe some of the stuff that didn't appear here. So notice I have this Gibson, a Hofner, this, and that, right? And then when I look here at the products table, I'm noticing, well, this one didn't end up there, did it? It didn't. I think part of the key is understanding that, this aspect of it. What is it really counting? And then the question is it really working correctly? All right, and I'm looking in the chat here. One of the students has, okay, that is almost identical to what I have. What and Teofilo, what kind of output did you get on that? Are you getting the same output as me? You got an error due to spelling. So did you fix the error? All right. Let me just kind of do something kind of weird here. I'm going to kind of like take this code, I'm going to break it off, right? Because what if a count greater than one in the products table? I guess, right? The question is, what is what are they counting? Are they really counting the discount percent? So why did the zero show up? Is really the question. So the discount percent is not in this result. So maybe the trick is maybe I take this code here, put a semicolon after it, and let's just run this code. So that one's giving me just the 30. Why is it outputting 30? And is the group by statement messing this up? Or is that not even running at this point? Oh, it needs the group by. All right, this is what it's saying. Can't give aggregated output. So if it's hitting 30%, which one is it pulling in? Well, it could be this one, and it could be this one, and it could be this one. So what I'm trying to show you, right? What it's counting is how many products have that discount percent. You got now you get it? Right? So I got three products that have a 30% discount, or four products that have a 30% discount. Um, I have one at 15, one at 25, one at 39, one at 52, one at 38. So when I run my original query, then I'm trying to get these windows out of the way. Let's just make all this stuff smaller. So if I run my original query, so I guess I'll remove that. Just want to make sure I'm not completely destroying everything. I think that's a complete one right there, right? Let's analyze the output again. Notice this is correct. Here's the why. These are all the ones where the discount percent is unique to that product. That's really what's being asked. See the difference? Where the other ones where I have a bunch of them that have a 30% discount, those are not in this list. All right, I know that's a complicated one, and I'm sorry. Right, but it's to get you to think a little bit and to wrestle with it and what it means. Then thank God I'm giving you the answer, I guess is probably the sigh of relief here. All right, we have one more to do. So let's go ahead and get to it. We have 8 minutes left here, so we should be able to get this one going. All right, so this one, let me paste in the instruction. All right, query that displays the customer's first name, last name, and email address, and the order's ID and order date. You'll need to use a subquery for the order date where you select the minimum order date. Okay, so in other words, what would the minimum order date be? That would be the oldest order. That's what we're looking for. So that should be kind of a simple query to write. And so let's kind of piece this together. I'm going to kind of do this in sort of a hurry up fashion. So they already told us what stuff to select. So here's the stuff they told us to select. I'm just pasting it in. Right, so first name, last name, email, order ID, and order date. If you start to analyze where that information comes from, it comes from two different tables. So from the customers table, which I'm going to alias as C, no, not cross. I'm going to join with the orders table that I'm going to alias as O. And what are we joining on? What's the field we're joining on? We're going to be joining on the customer ID in the customer table. Where it's equivalent to the customer ID in the orders table. And that makes sense, right? We don't want to pull information that doesn't link up. That's a really logical join. Then we also need to put in our filter where basically the order date, let me spell that right, is going to be equivalent. Now think about this is where the subquery kicks in to the minimum date for that particular customer, right? And even though you could write a longer, weirder query here to make that happen, I mean, this is really actually a very logical place for a subquery. So notice open and close parentheses, and then I'm going to, end the statement, but I'm probably going to add some more to that. And what I'm going to type here is I'm going to select, we can use the min function right here, the minimum order date, oops, close paren, from the orders table and where the customer ID equals the customer ID from the customers table. So right, this customer ID, the first one here is from the orders table, and this one's from the other table, aliased. We just want to make sure they link up. So in other words, whatever customer we're looking at, we're finding their oldest order. And then what does make sense here, right, is to do a little summary querying as well. And these are the two commands that I put in, right? And you can wrestle with those if you wish, but I'm going to group it by email address and order ID so we can kind of, organize it. And then we're going to order by order date and order ID, both of those. So if there's a lot of activity, you'll see it sorted and filtered. But this is the whole query here that I'm going to go ahead and execute. This is what I'm coming up with. Now, of course, what I would suggest that you really do is you go into the tables and verify that the information that we're pulling back is correct. There is, I mean, I can see the stuff is ordered nicely, and I'm looking at, like, for example, Alan Sherwood, I have an order date of 3/28/2018, and then I could go into the, let's say, the orders table and look. Of course, that doesn't have customer ID, so then I have to look up the customer ID. And what was this customer ID? Well, we don't know, so we have to go to the customers table and look at the data in that one. And this is how you verify it, right? So his customer ID is 1, right? And then we can look at the orders table and then see that, well, he ordered more than once. And which is the oldest order? And does that jive? Which is the oldest order? And does that jive with what we have here? So this is like, the kind of like backtracking you have to do to make sure that it's working. Now, once you have a more complicated query like this functioning, and you're sure that it's pulling back the right kind of information, then you're all set, right? And then you can just reiterate and use it over and over again. You don't have to check through like where the data is coming from and if it's correct. But take this, to heart, right? Like if you're coding professionally and you're first creating a query for a database, that you want to verify, like as you're first building it, is it pulling back the right stuff? And the other, problem solving techniques obviously are, since you have an inner and an outer query, and now we're combining it with the join, so it's getting even a little more complicated. You can run those queries separately to make sure that it's hitting all the right stuff. And I usually like to run the inner query first to figure out if it's doing what I think it's doing. All right, folks, that's the exercise portion of class today. So I'm going to terminate that here.